Welcome to the 6 Miles to Supper podcast. I'm your host, Kayla Cox, and I've lost over 80 pounds with intermittent fasting 6 days a week, eating whatever I wanted at my meals, taking a cheat day every Sunday, and walking 6 miles a day. And I'm here to help you on your weight loss journey. In today's episode, we're going to talk about looking at the year ahead and how that can help you in your weight loss journey. Now, as I record this is the first week of 2022. And if you're listening to this at a different point in the year, I just want to, say it's a great time of the year, no matter when it is, to sit down and look at the next 12 months, to think in that kind of a span of time. Unfortunately, with so much with weight loss, the tendency is to think in terms of days and weeks. I mean, I can't tell you how many YouTube thumbnails I've seen of, I tried, this certain thing for 6 days, or I tried this certain thing for 5 days, and that's just not long enough. That's not going to be long enough to truly give you results with any plan, really. And because, sometimes things are really easy to stick with in the short term, but in the long term, it's basically impossible. On the other hand, there are things that you can stick with for the very long term that will work over time, but it just takes your body some time to adjust, and it takes you time to get, used to it and get good at it. To me, intermittent fasting is one of those things that it takes time to get good at it. It's a weird thing compared to what everyone else around you is doing. And so it takes time to kind of adjust to it, to get your mind kind of wrapped around the idea of, not eating during certain parts of the day. But then once you get good at that, then it's pretty easy to do. And to me, it's a lot easier than, doing it that way, as opposed to, trying to get rid of certain food groups, like, I'm not going to have carbs, or I'm not going to eat this type of thing. And instead just getting used to, not eating during certain portions of the day. So one thing I've found is that it's very important to take the long view on the weight loss journey. When I struggled with my weight, and I would say that was up until the point of about the time I turned 30, I was always on a diet, always struggling with my weight. But then that changed really when I started taking a very long view, when I started thinking in terms of years and even decades and the rest of my life, as opposed to what can I, do for the next month or so. And so I love the beginning of the year. I love the end of the year and the beginning of the year, because it's such a good time to kind of review and then to look forward. And like I said, you can do this any time of the year. Like if you're listening to this in June and you're just like finally ready to lose the weight, it's a great time to sit down and think about, okay, the next 12 months, what do I want the next 12 months to look like? So in this episode, I'm going to just take you through the process I use at the end of the year and at the beginning of the year, what I do to set goals and what has worked for me and what has not worked for me. One thing that I find to be very helpful is to first look at the year that just passed. There's this human nature thing, I think, that we all experience, which is we have these grand plans in January, and we think we're going to accomplish all this stuff. We're going to adopt all these new great habits. And generally by February, most people have quit on most of those, resolutions or new habits. But I think if you take some time to first review and look back at the past year and what all happened, it can help you to prepare, more intelligently for the year going forward. So the first thing I do is I look back. Now, at the beginning of each year for the past several years now, I make a list of goals that I want to achieve, especially, starting in 2015. That's the one year that I really do remember. I sat down, put it on a Google Doc so that I could always look at it and just write down various areas, what do I want to accomplish? And then, the next year you look back and you see, what did you accomplish? I find it's really helpful, first of all, to look at that Google Doc that I wrote down these things on, but maybe you put that in a journal or some other place. But regardless, look back at your goals. And if you didn't set any goals, then you could just ask yourself, where was I this time last year? And what have I accomplished? I find it's really helpful if you do keep a journal to reread your journals. That takes a couple of hours depending on how verbose you are throughout the year. But it can be really useful to remind you, because sometimes what I found is you're going to forget a lot of what happened. And sometimes we can be a little bit too hard on ourselves if we forget like, oh, well, this happened and this happened and this happened this year. And you can think, why didn't I, accomplish that thing? Well, it might be because you had some crazy things happening in your life. So look back at your journal. For weight loss, certainly look back at any like weight tracking that you've done. I like to keep track of all of my stuff in a spreadsheet. I have those for free on my website, 6milestosupper.com/freebies. There's a weight tracking spreadsheet, or you can certainly use apps. There are plenty of good apps out there that will track your weight for you. And so looking at those numbers, seeing what did your weight do last year, and then also think about how consistent were you with your plan. You can also look at your calendar. I find that's helpful sometimes too, just to kind of remind you, oh, here's what I was doing on a weekly basis, or, here are the fun things that we had that went on, or maybe the sad things that happened too. And you can also just think back through your memory, like try to think back through each month and try to come up with the highlights. And that can give you like an overarching picture of that was last year. Now, the next thing that you need to do is ask yourself, where am I right now? Where am I at? Let's talk about weight. You're listening to a weight loss podcast, so let's talk about your weight. What is your weight today? And is that where you want to be? And it might be that where you're at right now with your weight is actually where you want to be. One thing that I know for sure is that it's a very popular thing to kind of always be on the weight loss train, like to never say you're happy with where you're at with your weight. It's almost like, no, I always need to be wanting to lose that last, 10 pounds or whatever. But it's okay for you to, take stock of your situation and to say, you know what? I'm happy with where I'm at. I've been happy with where I'm at for several years now. And really I'll say it again because I think it's so important, because you just don't hear people say this often. But I've been happy with my weight. When I stopped losing weight the first time, that was at the end of 2016, I was like around 158. And I maintained between like 158 to 163, which was technically a few pounds overweight, but I stayed there for like a year before I decided to lose more. And really the only reason I lost more was because I had that YouTube channel, and I was like, well, I should get down below that technical number of being overweight. And I've been under 154 now for several years, and I gotta say though, I don't feel different. I don't feel different when I compare how I felt, how I felt physically and how I felt about how I looked from like 158, 158 to 163, all the way down to like into the 140s, which is where I try to maintain. But so the point is, don't think that, it's going to always make a big difference in how I feel or physically, or how I feel emotionally about, how I look just by losing more weight. In my experience, it's just not true. So it's okay, if right now you're looking at your weight and you're saying, hey, I feel good here. Like I feel good here. That's okay then to say, okay, now what do I do to maintain in this range? But maybe you want to lose. It might be that you look back and you say, last year I really wanted to lose like 50 pounds. And, maybe you only lost 10, or maybe you didn't lose any. Maybe you gained some. Ask yourself, why did that happen? What plan were you on, and what went wrong? I mean, it always stinks, right? When something doesn't work, when something just goes wrong, but it's such a good opportunity to learn. I've learned so much on the weight loss journey just by learning, what doesn't work for me. Those moments where I was the most resentful or the most angry, that's really when I had the best moments of clarity. So if you're sitting there and you say, okay, here's where I'm at with my weight, and yeah, I want to lose weight, and and here is where I'm at with my activity level. I'm sedentary, or maybe you're not as active as you want to be. Then it's okay to just acknowledge that and to say, okay, here's where I'm at. And it's actually really important to be very honest with where you're currently at and what you're currently doing, and then ask yourself, where do you want to be 1 year from today? So you've got 12 months sitting in front of you right now. Where do you want to be sitting? This time next year, what kind of review are you going to want to have? Are you going to want to be down a certain number of pounds? Or do you have other types of goals that you want to set for yourself? And it might be something like a range of weight you want to be in. Like, for example, I like to use the BMI charts. I know they're not perfect, but, just to give you an example, a healthy weight for me based on my height is between 115 and 154. That's a pretty big range. I mean, that's like what, 40 pounds of weight. And that can seem like a lot, I'm sure it's like, wow, how could that be a healthy range? But it is, statistically speaking, according to, the CDC, this is a healthy range to be in, and problems tend to crop up in those higher numbers, when you get into the overweight and then especially into the obese range. It's like your risk level just increases. So you get to decide based on that data, where do you want to be? And you can also ask yourself, what kind of activities do you want to incorporate into your life, and do you foresee yourself doing? All this, when we're talking about losing weight, it does mean that you're going to change your behavior. So with eating, with intermittent fasting, let's say, when you decide that you're going to start practicing intermittent fasting, it means that you are willing to not eat food during a certain window during the day. And if you're not willing to do that, it's important to be honest with yourself and then change your plan before you even try to implement it. Just say, okay, you know what? I thought that I would be okay with like one meal a day, but actually that is not going to work for me. And it's better to just go ahead and figure that out when you're in this planning phase than it is to kind of beat your head against the wall and think, well, this isn't really going to work, but then you go out and try it anyway and then it doesn't work. It's better to really go ahead and just kind of try to map it out, plan it out, and based on your own knowledge of yourself, form your own plan. And it's really important to write down your plan. This is something that so many people are resistant to. I was resistant to it. And it's really, though, one of the most important things that you can do for yourself with weight loss is to write down your plan, because then you can check against yourself and say, am I sticking to this plan? You would be surprised how often, if you don't write it down, how often you're going to change the plan on yourself. And eventually, when you're sitting there and you're having trouble, like, why am I not losing any weight? You're probably going to figure out, like, you don't even know what exactly it is that you've done or what you've really tried, because you're switching stuff up all the time and you're not really sticking to it. And that makes for a lot of frustration. So instead, if you just write down, okay, here's what I'm doing. Like, for example, this even be really, really simple. It could be something like, I'm going to have a 16-8 window. So I'm going to fast for 16 hours each day. I'm going to eat during an 8-hour window each day. And I'm going to get 10,000 steps in a day. I mean, that's just like something I just created off the top of my head. But that's something you could try. That's specific enough to say, okay, this is what I'm doing. And if you don't do that, though, if you're like, well, I'm just going to try to do intermittent fasting, well, then how long are you doing? Like, how do you really know you're doing your plan? You really don't until you're more specific and you've written it down. And then begin to track your progress. And this, again, I know is something that's hard. If you're scared of the scale, it is hard. It's so hard to get on the scale for that first time, especially if it's been a while, if it's been years, because I was there in 2015. It had been years and years since I had gotten on the scale, and it was terrifying to climb up there. But I've been doing it every day since then, and it becomes like nothing. It becomes like, the same kind of feeling as when I brush my teeth. That's how I feel when I step on the scale. And keep track of that number. It's so useful. Like, if you're trying to lose weight and you're not weighing yourself, it's just almost impossible to really know whether you're making progress or not. All the other methods, like trying to look at how your pants are fitting, or, like measuring yourself with a tape measure, it's just too easy to fool yourself, in my opinion. But with a scale, even though, it's going to, sometimes maybe you're going to have water weight and it's, not true weight, and that weight's going to fluctuate a bit. And that's going to be something to deal with. It's just really, it's almost impossible to fool it over time. It's very quick and easy and very objective. Whereas everything else, you can pull tape tighter, or you can say, oh yeah, I think these pants are fitting, looser, when really they're not. So keep track. So So having your plan, your written plan, and then keeping track of your progress. I prefer daily weighing and keeping track of the 7-day average so you can see how your weight is trending over time. And then having that written plan so that you can see like, okay, yes, my plan is working, or no, my plan is not working. And when you have it written out, then it's much easier to make little changes to it. So what might you accomplish this year? That's a great question. And it really comes down to you. And it really comes down to what are you willing to do? But it also comes down to what is your body like, and how much weight do you have to lose, and what are you willing to do? If right now you're at a place where maybe you're already in the normal BMI and say like you're wanting to lose 10 pounds, it's going to be slow, more than likely. I mean, you're already a healthy weight. And when you get down into that healthy weight zone, it's just harder to take weight off. So it might be fractions of a pound that you're going to lose per week. On the other hand, maybe you're very obese. And so maybe you'll lose a little bit faster if you're consistent, like a pound a week is a good goal if you're, in the obese range. And, a pound a week at the end of the year, you're down like 52 pounds. But if you can only do like, say, half a pound a week, that's still 26 pounds. That's still really good. And even if you can only find a way to lose, a quarter of a pound a week, you're still down 13 pounds at the end of the year. And what if it takes you a few years? Like when you're thinking about the rest of your life, it's okay if this takes a while. So if right now you're in a place and maybe you have a lot of weight left to lose, but you're just not there yet, like where you can really commit to doing something a bit more drastic, then it's okay. Commit to doing something really small, eating just a little bit less and maybe just losing a tiny bit of weight each week. But over time, that will add up to big changes. I mean, think about it. If you're losing, 10 pounds a year, over 10 years, that's 100 pounds that you could be down. And so don't worry if you really can't get yourself to commit to bigger changes. Just instead commit to the smaller ones, the ones that you can do, no matter what that means for you. Just be focused on yourself and what you can do. And while you're at it, when you're sitting down and you're writing out these goals, and again, timeline wise, it's very difficult, maybe even impossible to really know how much weight you're going to lose this year. I've been around enough people and I've had the same experience with myself where it's like, you can do all the right things and you can be very consistent, but your body loses the weight at the rate it's going to lose it at. And people are very individual. So you may lose weight slowly. Someone else may lose weight quickly, but that's just the way it goes. So in the meantime, make those goals. So, have an idea of where you would like to be next year and write down your goals based on that. But then also use that time to think about other areas in your life and some goals that you would like to achieve there. And that can be really useful when you are trying to achieve goals, with weight loss, and maybe it's going a little bit slower. If you're also working on some other things, that can be helpful. Maybe you've got some savings goals that you want to do. You're wanting to maybe save up for a car or save up for a house. Have those types of goals written down too, so that you can see like, okay, maybe this week wasn't that great when it came to weight loss, but you did make progress in some other areas. And it can help those tougher times on the weight loss journey feel a lot easier, because if you're striving towards several goals all at once, it can just help you mentally to know that, okay, I'm a little bit stagnated here, but I am making progress in this other area. Here are the areas that I like to set goals in: my finances, my spiritual life, my social life, my career, creative areas, intellectual, and then also my family, my kids and my marriage. And I make goals in all those areas so that, over the course of the year, I can try to work on improving all those areas. And I found that it really is quite helpful and it makes for a better life overall. So I hope that 2022 is a great year for you. When I looked back on my 2021, I realized, I kind of had a rough year. I lost some really important people in my life, some of them rather unexpectedly. And it's just, if anything, made me want to, going forward, be more intentional with, spending more time with the people that I love and really enjoying every aspect of my life. So I hope you found this episode helpful, and I'll see you in the next one. Do you want to lose the weight without getting rid of the foods you love and that you know you'll go back to eating again anyway? My book, The Laid Back Guide to Intermittent Fasting, teaches you how to practice intermittent fasting so that you lose the weight sustainably and keep it off for good. You can get the audiobook read by me for free when you sign up for your 30-day trial of Audible. The link is in the show notes. And if you've gotten value from this podcast and you'd like to let other people know about it, it would be great if you could leave a review on either iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. Thanks.